I've got a lot of thoughts about Snow White, the remake, but I'm not going to focus on all those thoughts, just one. Hi, I'm Parker J. Cole, and I have been writing since 2011, and I'm just sharing my writerly thoughts with you. I love to write romance and explore history through the vehicle of romance, and these are just my writerly thoughts about lots of different things. I know it's been a while since I did my last writerly thoughts. Life interfered as it usually does, but I was thinking, what's a good way to kind of come back and just share some more writerly thoughts with you? So I recently watched Snow White, the remake from 2025. And as you know, this film had a lot of controversy with it relating to the message they were going to be promoting, which was more political in nature. The main star of the show, Rachel Zegler, some of her inflammatory comments that people had. I'm not going to talk about any of that. What I am going to talk about is the story of Snow White. And I want to talk about that because even though the movie wasn't great, it wasn't terrible, but they did something that I think deserves some discussion. To preface this, I want to say that when we talk about fairy tales were always meant to tell children that even though there are dragons, dragons could be conquered. Even though there are robbers and bandits can be defeated. Even though you are lost, you can be found. Fairy tales were often quite frightening, and they were frightening because you want to let the children know that the world is dark, that the world has dark things in it, and you wanted to prepare them for that. But in the midst of preparing the child for the darkness, you wanted to let the child know there was light. Now, it's no secret that a lot of fairy tales have a lot of Christian allegory in it. The lost children, like in Hansel and Gretel, the betrayed good princess, the woman who is looking for a child and the child gets changed. All of these represent the body of Christ. They represent someone who is in turmoil. The prince, the knight, the hero, the king often represented Christ himself, and he was coming to save the day. Now, I want you to picture this and kind of get this in your head. You are a princess strapped to a rock and chained to a rock. You are unable to get away from this rock. You cannot get out of the situation. And before you, you see fire breathing dragon coming towards you. This dragon is going to burn and eat you. You are stuck. You are literally caught between a rock and a hard place, and you are calling out for help. You are a damsel in distress. There are people who don't like the imagery that a damsel in distress brings. I'm perfectly okay with that because as a damsel in distress, I am crying out for help. And so, what these fairy tales did, they personified this struggle that people have in their lives, being caught between a rock and a hard place. To go on with the illustration of a damsel in distress, you are about to be eaten by a dragon, and there is nothing you can do. Then all of a sudden, the knight in shining armor appears. And I think it's significant because the knight in shining armor glows. He's full of light. He captures your attention, and he also draws away the attention of the dragon from you. He takes all of that on you. Now let's go ahead and use a biblical parable for a second. Do you remember the story of the woman caught in adultery? Well, they brought the woman who was caught in adultery before the Lord Jesus, and they threw her down, they condemned her. And what did Jesus do? The first thing Jesus did is that he took the attention away from her and put it on himself. In the same way, the knight in shining armor takes the attention away from the dragon's attention, away from that damsel in distress to himself. And then he comes to the rescue on his valiant steed. He comes to the rescue and he saves you from the dragon because we all know the prince will defeat the dragon. We do know that Christ will defeat the dragon, that he will defeat the enemy. So the fairy tales encompass this Christian allegory, but in entertaining ways and in many different ways. Why do I say all this? In the remake of Snow White, we do not have a prince. We have instead bandit, Jonathan, who is a leader of bandits in the forest. He doesn't have a noble lineage, he doesn't have an honorable lineage. He's just someone who remembered what the kingdom used to be like. And what the kingdom used to be like is no longer there. And so he steals from the castle to get food. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with that because we understand that the evil queen is made to be evil, that she's cruel to the people. Cruelty also extends to Snow White, as Snow White is forced to be a servant in her own castle. In the movie, Jonathan is stealing food from the castle. He gets caught, he gets punished, but Snow White rescues him and frees him. Later on, the queen calls for her execution. The huntsman doesn't kill her, he tells her to run. And Snow White is running through the forest, and all these terrible things are happening to her. And then she meets the woodland creatures, she eventually meets the dwarves, and then she eventually meets Jonathan and his bandits. And Jonathan is kind of rude to her at first because he says she has a lot of princess problems. And he talks about how she needs to get her act together. And the song is actually called Princess Problems. Again, there's some political messaging here, but I'm not going to go into that because I don't think that is as important as what I'm about to tell you here. And so Jonathan, he and Snow White fall in love as they're supposed to, and then toward the end of the movie, she falls to a deep sleep after she takes a bite from the apple, and Jonathan comes and gives her a kiss. At the end of Snow White, though, we do not have a scene where Jonathan becomes her king. They don't get married. There's no unity. There's no kingdom coming together. And this is what I think is one of the flaws, one of the biggest flaws of Snow White is that we don't have a prince. There's a twofold reason to this. I think there may be, whether intentionally or not, a drive to say that good men don't exist. And for Jonathan, he is a rebel. He's morally gray because he's a bandit that's stealing from the queen. So he is doing something wrong. He is stealing, but you can say that he's stealing to give food to the people, which is fine. I get it. But are we saying that the prince doesn't exist? The prince represents the good man. He represents Christ. He represents the good man. Are we saying that good men don't exist and that the only type of men that women can depend on are morally gray? And I think that was one of the flaws that we needed the prince to come to the rescue, to the princess. A princess needs a prince. Or if you didn't want him to rescue her, maybe she could have fought by his side. I couldn't imagine where they could not have done a scenario where the armies of the evil queen are coming against their combined armies, and together they overthrow the evil queen. Because if the queen is evil, she's going to have supporters. Just like if you're a good guy, you're going to have supporters. You're going to have an army that will go ahead and build forth your agenda. And so that was one of the biggest flaws I could see in the remake of Snow White is that she didn't have the prince. She had a bandit leader, which is fine. I'm not saying all men have to be princely, but just the idea of the prince. Here's the thing, in my opinion, good men protect us from bad men, just like good women protect us from bad women. In this case, in Snow White, the remake, we don't have that. And I think that's what we needed. We needed the prince because afterwards, when the prince destroys the dragon or gets rid of that threat, what happens? He usually takes the princess away to his kingdom where they marry and they join in union, they have children, and they unite the kingdoms together, just like what Christ does for us, that he will take us away from the dragon and we will live in his kingdom. And so when you take out that element, you're putting salvation or being saved, if you will, on yourself and not on the prince who's trying to save you from the dragon. Now, some people may be saying, well, Parker, you're making too much of it. I'm just sharing you my writerly thoughts and why I think this is one of the flaws of the movie. Some of the other things have to do with the minutia of the movie. Like I said, I'm not going to get into that. I actually did a more concrete article about this, which is in the link below. Yesterday, got some chatter, which is really good. Some people agreed with me, some people didn't, which is completely fine. You don't have to agree with me. So, in my writerly thought, I think we should always make sure that the good guy isn't taken out of the equation. Now, listen, I love romance. I've read my dark romances, and I think I told you my guilty pleasure is mafia romances. That's my guilty pleasure, fully admit it. But good men are out there. And I think they need to get a good rap too. So let's not forget the good men out there who do come to save the day, whether they're firefighters, uh, medical personnel, doctors, policemen, lawyers. There are good men out there to save the day. It doesn't have to be those high-end jobs. Could be a janitor, a teacher, a coach. Good men are out there, and they're out there and they're willing to save the day. So that's what I think was missing from Snow White 2025 was the prince to unite the kingdom with the princess so she can become king and queen. Another thing too, and I say that because in the beginning of the movie too, this is my last thought. In the beginning of the movie too, her father was a good man. He was a very kind man. The people loved and respected him. So why couldn't she have that for herself in the form of a prince who would unite their kingdoms? And so what happens is that when you don't have that prince, and some people have talked about the strong girl boss archetype, what happens is that the archetype doesn't have anyone to pour into her. She's the only one that's pouring out of herself. And I got that actually from one of the people who commented on the article. And it actually makes sense. So that was what I think was missing from Snow White 2025. What are your thoughts? Did you enjoy the movie? Are you going to see it? What do you think? I would love to know your thoughts below. And thank you for this episode of the Parkerly's Writer Thoughts. And I'll be back with some more thoughts in another episode. Have a great day. God bless.